Hello and welcome to another video about Fantasy Grounds Unity. This series attempts to answer the most frequently asked questions about Unity, but we're going to have a slight departure today because of the announcement yesterday that Wizards of the Coast and Smiteworks are allowing you to use the Lost Mine of Phandelver for free for the next month. The date of recording here is 9th April 2020. So for the next month you'll be able to use this module, run adventures with it. So I thought it would be good to just have an introduction to the module and how you would use it in Fantasy Grounds Unity. Much of what we are discussing here will also be relevant to Classic. So once you've updated Fantasy Grounds and you've downloaded and installed the adventure, we go to our library module and then click on modules. And once this screen has loaded, we can just type in Lost down here, and this will take us to the module itself. Click on the load button and it'll appear in our library window. Now you might want to load up the Player's Handbook or Basic Rules or any other modules as well, but we'll just concentrate on the adventure itself. Now the structure of the adventures, or this adventure, is pretty much the same as any of the adventures for the 5th edition rule set, and they're all pretty much the same. And I would recommend that your first port of call once you've loaded the thing is to go to the reference manual here, click on the Lost Mine here, and then on the preface or preface, and then you can then read through the manual. You can use this buttons down at the bottom here to navigate backwards and forwards through it, and it's just basically like reading a book. You just keep clicking and read the text as you go through, just like you would in a book. If you come across a page here where you think, well, this might be important, I might want to keep this or reference this sometime during the adventure, then you can click on this little icon up at the top here, and this sort of pops the page out, and then you can drag this and drop it into one of your quick bar slots, and you can recover that more easily by just clicking on it or pressing the relevant function key, and you'll get the page back. As you can see throughout, there's various images. If you just click on the image, it'll pop it out. In this case we've got a map, and we can also see that there are some red pins on the map. Mouse over these. These are to various places that the players might visit during the course of the adventure. We can click on any of these pins, and this will take us to the reference page that is relevant to that pin. We've got another map here, we can click on that. We've got some more pins here, we can click on that, and that takes us to the story entry for that particular part of this map. Once you've read through the adventure and familiarized yourself with it, and once you're ready to get going with the adventure, then as part of your preparation, you might want to add the pre-generated characters that come with the module into your campaign. So we're back to our library pre-generated characters. We get this window here, and simply click on these buttons to add each of these characters or whatever characters you want to your campaign. Now you don't need to use these characters, the players can make up their own of course, but I would recommend that if you're running it for the first time that you use these characters, because they've been set up, they've been recently thoroughly revised, and so all the information to do with the characters is in there, all the effects are set up for you, etc. So these are good characters to start with if you're just DMing your first game. So once you've added your characters, if we open the PC window here, we can see the characters here, and they are essentially, as I say, they're all pre-prepared for you. If we have a look at this one here, everything that, all the stats are in there, all their abilities and everything like that are in there. The Notes tab, particularly important, because if we scroll down here we get a story about this person, their background, what their personal goals are, and all the characters, all the player characters in the adventure have got some connection to the adventure, which you can use as an adventure hook to hook the characters into the story of the Lost Mine. Now there's a couple of things you'll probably want to do. You'll probably want to change the name, so you can just click in here and you can delete what's there, and you can just put in your own name or the name, whatever name the player wants the character to be called. We've got this little black square up at the top left here. If we click on that, this brings up the portraits. You double click on this. If we find the Smiteworks portraits, there we go, and obviously we'll give it Zacchaeus' portrait here. Just double click on that, and that will automatically add the portrait to the character sheet, and it will also add the portrait by default to the token space as well. Now, if you didn't want to use a portrait for a token, we can go into our assets, make sure we've got tokens selected. Let's just type in dwarf, and we will get a list of dwarf tokens that we have from all the modules that you might have. So let's just pick that one at random. We drag that in, and we now have a token for our cleric. And then we're really just ready to run the adventure. Now you can do this in two ways. You can go back to the reference manual and you can run it from there. You can just take each story as it comes, click on the next page, and etc, etc. Or you can use the story entries, which is really the same as the reference manual. The reference manual kind of collects everything together, but the story entries are, as I say, they're pretty much the same. We've got the navigation buttons here. We've got text here, which is in a chat box. We've got this little icon here, and if we click that, it puts the text into the chat so that the players can see it. And we can just go through all of these stories one by one to and work out and do whatever the story entry does. And we can do exactly the same thing with the reference manual. You can do it the same if we go here, Goblin Arrows, Cragmaw Hideout, and this is the same story really, the same as this story entry. The only thing is we've got the graphics are embedded into the reference, whereas they're just simply linked here. So this map here is the same as this map here, which is just linked rather than embedded in the story entry or embedded in the reference itself. So if the players and you've got a DM map, this one is the DM map, and you can see that the DM map has got the room numbers on it, etc, etc, and it's got some information. If we look at the players map here, we can see that the room numbers, etc, have been removed, so that and this will be true with any secret doors or anything like that. That are on this map, that'll be on the DM version, but you won't see it on the player's version. The player's version of the map is also the combat map. This is the map that we use to handle all the combat and the player movement, etc. And we can show you this if we get our combat tracker up. If we put Bob the Cleric in here, and then if we drag Bob onto the map, place him there. Don't need the combat tracker just now, we can move that. And we then unlock this map. I enabled the line of sight, which is all built into the module for you. Click on that to enable the line of sight. We can lock up the map again, and when we click on Bob here we can see that the line of sight is lit up, or the areas that Bob can see is all lit up, and as we move Bob around, more or less of the area, different areas light up through the line of sight. This is of course the DM screen, so the player's views here will be a bit different. All he'll see is the light areas and everything else will be completely dark. You can see that these maps have also got pins on them in the same way as the Dungeon Master's map has, and if we click on this pin here we can read about the encounter that's about to happen. We can add that text to the chat box, and we also have here an encounter which is linked, so if we open that up we'll see that there's a couple of goblins here. We click on this little button and this adds the goblins to the combat tracker and also adds them to the map. So this is how you basically run through the story, and as you can see here that Bob can't see these goblins because they're not within his line of sight, and he won't be able to see them until he moves into their sight, and the Dungeon Master can then show all the NPCs. If Bob moves back out of the way again, then he can no longer see them, although they're still on the map, they're still on the combat tracker, but he can't actually see the NPCs from there. So let's move this out of the way as well. We'll leave this encounter here for the moment, because we also want to have a look at the party sheet here. If we have a look at the party sheet, this gives you information on the party members and all sorts of things, and you want your player characters to be on the party sheet. So let's get Bob dragged into the party sheet. And the reason for that is that if we click on the XP counter here, once they've defeated these goblins, then you can drag this and drop it into the party sheet here, and then clicking on this button here will award the experience points for the encounter to all the players. Now, Bob got all the experience here, but if there was 4 party members, then they would get 25 each rather than the 100 which Bob's got there just now. So this is how you would get your experience points into the players. If we go back to our story entry, we can see that there's various links to rulebooks and things like that for the benefit of the Dungeon Master. And if we keep clicking through here for a little while, we may come upon a treasure parcel at some point in time. Here we go. So we again linked to the story and to the reference manual entries. There are these treasure parcels. If we open these up, there's another one here. You'll see that these are all created for you. They're all sort of ready to go, and these two are things which you go into the party sheet. So once the players have found this, you can just simply drag the parcel into the party sheet. The gold pieces and silver pieces here, copper pieces get added in, and these actual items here also get added in. And the DM then has the option of distributing this treasure to the players, or the players can simply drag the treasure using this button here into their own inventory. But let's suppose that Bob's going to be claiming the 2 potions of healing, so we just start typing in Bob. As soon as we've got his name, we can tab out of that, and then the Dungeon Master can distribute the treasure and coins by clicking this button here. And now Bob, who can see in the party sheet, Bob got all the treasure. He's got his 2 potions of healing, and he got all the coins that were in the party sheet were all distributed, because of course Bob is the only one that we have assigned to the party sheet. This item here hasn't been assigned to anybody, so Bob might decide that when he goes back to town he's going to sell it. The Dungeon Master can adjust the percentage here. Once they've decided that they're going to sell, we just click this button and the item gets sold for the gold value, or 50% of this case in the gold value, and the gold gets then put into the coins, and we can then distribute that to the party again. So if we get rid of some of this, so I would recommend that the way that you run the adventure is to basically use the maps and the story. So if we go back to our castle map, then that was the wrong map, wasn't it? It was the hideout. If we go back to this one here, as the players move through the dungeon, they come to this room here, you can then click on that. You can run whatever needs to be done with that room. You can add the encounter to the combat tracker. You can work through the encounters, and then once the players move again to another area, you can just click on the pin for that and do all the necessary steps and for that one as well. So basically you would be running, once you get into a map like this, you would be running the game from the player's map. You might want to have the Dungeon Master's map up as well, just to make sure that there's no secret doors or anything like that you're missing. But often that's described in the text anyway. So let's briefly cover combat then. We would need our combat tracker up. You can see Bob and our two goblins are on the combat tracker. Move Bob a little bit closer. It's Bob's turn, so he wants to attack one of these goblins here, so he's going to hold down the CTRL key and he's going to click on the goblin he wants to target. This would all be done by the player, of course, but the DM can do this too. And then the player would just simply decide what of his many weapons that he's going to use, and then just double click to make the attack, and then if he hits, double click to make the damage, and you'll see that Fantasy Grounds handles all that for us. He actually missed, but if we pretend that he hit, he did some damage, and Fantasy Grounds updates the combat tracker to show the damage that the goblin took. And if we move round to the DM's turn, the DM basically does the same thing. This goblin here then is going to target Bob, so he's going to CTRL click, and Bob has been targeted. He's going to shoot his short bow at Bob, and if it hits, he's going to do damage, and you just double click here. So there's a lot more to all of this, but this is just a brief overview of what the Lost Mine of Phandelver is all about and how you can get started. So hopefully this was useful. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.